think is really important is, yes, we will lean on people that are close to us, family, friends, other people. When we do that, it's almost drawing on resources and, you know, putting your hand up and saying, I'm drowning or I'm struggling.
Yeah.
But there is a part of us that is always protective of the other person. So I'll share and I'll let you know what's going on, but I'm also monitoring that I don't overwhelm you in the process.
I love them. I really love them.
Yeah, yeah.
So
you kind of almost like toing and froing a lot. Whereas if you phone one of the mental health lines, for instance, or you engage with some kind of therapist, then you don't have to worry about them.
Correct.
It's their job to look after themselves. Yeah. So there's just automatically this freedom where you can be however you need to be. And for some people, and I guess I'll reflect on something you said earlier about not everyone's ready to start to tell you about, you know, emotional stuff that's happening or what's happened over the last couple of years or what their childhood was like, for instance, because it takes time to build that kind of relationship where someone will share that with you.
Absolutely. And I think even, you know, the patients, you know, I've seen patients over many years with non-organic neurological complaints. So, you know, they're dizzy and then they're fainting and then this and then that. And I remember one patient then coming and saying to me, bouncing in, looking absolutely fantastic. And I'm like, how are you? You look amazing. And she said, I've separated from my husband. It was a really toxic relationship and feeling more confident and work's going well. And I was like, oh my gosh, thank God. That's such wonderful news.
Yeah.
But it wasn't something that even she had the insight to know that whole disrupted life that she was having to endure and the mood disturbance and, you know, loss of self-esteem, whatever was going with it, was making it sick. You know, it was making it sick. And I don't think it was in any way a purposeful, it wasn't a purposeful, I'm going to have these sicknesses because I'm not feeling great in this circumstance. There was zero of that going on. This was a really good example of, you know, psychosomatic manifestations that were really not recognised by me because I had no idea about what was going on, or by her. Because, you know, you may not know that can happen.
And that's not the relationship that you have with your patients.
Correct.
You don't have a therapeutic relationship where
it's
that
hard
comes
as a
up.
doctor to say, you know, it's hard to ask those questions. And I guess, again, that comes down to training and normalising things, you know, using, I guess, sometimes maybe questionnaires. Like, for example, we screen, well, when we had patients in the hospital, our patients would sit with an iPad before the clinic and do the, you know, depression score, the anxiety score, all those sorts of things, just answer all the questions. So then before we brought them in, we could look at them. And then we could say, oh, I noticed on that questionnaire, it looks like you're a bit stressed. Is there anything going on? You know, is that maybe why the seizures flared up or what have you? And relating it back, I think, to the medical problem can break the ice a bit, particularly with people who clearly don't want to acknowledge it. The more elderly population find it really quite hard to acknowledge those problems because, as we talked about, as they were growing up, this was not something you talked about. You went to the, you know, whatever it is, the institution down the road if you had those sorts of problems. And that was it. Which is obviously a terrible tragedy in those times, but I don't know, it's tricky.
It is really tricky. And as you were saying that, I thought I do some work in the domestic violence sector, but also working alongside disability. And even as you were talking about mental health and how that's, because the word that comes to me is it's been demonised over time, you know, which is not a great word to use, but it kind of has been. And even some of the work I've done, you know, with disadvantage based on disability, for instance, for women with disability who are subjected to some kind of abuse or violence, is that sometimes the way we've looked at disability, and in this instance, because of the work I do, women with disabilities, is that some disabilities, believe it or not, in the past have been demonised as well. You know, they have this whole like toxic kind of really immoral understanding about why those people have those disabilities. It just blows my mind when I think about it. And because I'm not a woman who identifies as having a disability, it's really important for me to understand that. I understand how incapacitating it is with mental health concerns, because I see that with my clients every day. But I think we need to understand that for a very long time there are a lot of things that people have struggled with in society that have been labelled and they've been demonised or they've been wronged. And so I think what happens when we start to talk to people about, you used manifested as a word, it's almost like, well, has the relationship I've chosen made me sick, right? So there's almost a blame that's attached to it, and that's not the intention.
No.
It's not to say, well, it's your fault because you were in this relationship.
No.
But I think sometimes people go there, they don't want to accept that because then I have to take responsibility, and so there's some blame in that.
Yeah, and I think it's like, I think people will often assume that you're implying that they're putting it on. And I'm very careful to say, you're not doing this on purpose. I know you're not doing this on purpose.
Yeah.
But this has made this happen. And so somehow we've got to undo that.
Yeah.
And I think that is, the general teaching with, if you look at the criteria, there are, there's functional neurological disorders, which are the sort I'm talking about. There's, people who are just frank malingerers, but most of these people are not malingering. They've not got secondary gain. They're not getting anything out of this. They probably most of the time genuinely are not sure or certain way any of this is happening. And obviously you always have to go through a process of investigation to exclude underlying stuff. But yeah, you're right. And I think it is that whole, when you talked about disorders being demonised, epilepsy is my subspecialty, and people with epilepsy used to be assumed to be possessed, and have to go under exorcisms to try to get rid of their seizures.